Everybody, how's everybody doing? You guys ready? Thumbs up. All right, let's do it. So, just a disclaimer, today's lesson is going to be, I want to focus more on reflection and application of what we're learning. So let's go to the outline first. So let's see today's outline. So we're going to start with a recap, and then we're going to talk about briefly the Prophet ﷺ's years as a merchant. So we'll look at one story in this section, and then we'll also talk about the marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha, and then we'll stop there. But I want to, just like I said, reflect and kind of think of the things that we're learning, think of how we can apply these principles in our lives. All right, so let's start. First things first, recap. So what we've been talking about so far are the teenage years of the Prophet ﷺ. And one thing to know is that during this time, he had divine protection. So he never drank, he never worshipped idols, he didn't eat pork or things like that. He would actually refuse to eat something that was sacrificed on the name of an idol. So in that sense, he was protected from falling into sin. And I was thinking about it, I was like, what's the big deal about, bowing a couple times to a funny looking stone? And think about this a bit more. People who were idol worshippers, they turned to idols for everything. So if they had a request, they would go to their idols and ask for that request. If they wanted to show thankfulness for receiving something good, then they would go to the idol and show gratefulness. So their entire worldview, their perspective of life, was that the idols would provide for them. They would protect them, rather than showing this thankfulness and this obedience and worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Allah who truly provides for us, each and every one of us, every day. He's given us everything, the clothes we have, the money that we have in our families, everything. He's created us. And Allah is more loving to each and every one of us than even our own mothers. So Allah is the rightful owner of praise. So just think about it, right? And this is not an exact comparison, but just to put it in perspective, let's say that you're working on a group project and you're the only one doing the work in this group project, and it's time for the presentation. And so you guys stand up, you put your presentation on the board, and the other guy just stands there during the entire presentation and says nothing. And after the presentation is done, you get no credit. The other guy gets an A+, and he gets an entire internship too after this presentation. So what do you think about that? Is that fair? I'd say that's really unjust, right? So put that into perspective now. That's what these idol worshippers are really doing. That's the problem with worshiping an idol. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ was protected from, even when his entire society was indulged in idolatry. That was the oftentimes in the Quran you hear, like, this is what our forefathers did and it's right. This is what our forefathers did and that's why we do it. So the entire city was full of idolatry and he was still protected from it. So going to this ayah in the Quran, just to understand like how unjust it is, Allah says that it's a story about somebody in the Quran named Luqman, and he's basically a really wise person. And he says to his son, hey son, make sure you don't worship anything other than Allah, because if you do that, then that's dhulm alim. That's like a huge unjust thing to do. It's the worst of all wrongs. And so we kind of understand it now, right? Like, why is it so bad? It's because Allah is the one who was giving us everything, who was giving us life, provision, and we're giving the credit to something else. We're turning our attention to something else completely. So that's just one thing to know. And the second thing is that even if you don't, necessarily think of worship a lot, in pre-modern days, worship was very stressed. Like, people were very religious. But the fact is, we all worship something, even if we know it or we don't. So even atheists are, people that don't believe in God, but they still worship, they still believe in something. At the end of the day, our human nature is wired to search for God. So that's our nature. That's what's called fitrah. It's a word that's mentioned in the Quran as well. Fitrah. It's the nature that Allah has put us on. It's to orient ourselves towards God, to see a higher power. And one thing that you can kind of learn from this is that people who say they don't believe in God, you can kind of question that. And just think about this, right? I've heard stories of people narrating near death life experiences. So for example, people are on an airplane and the airplane starts shaking violently and things are going out of control, people are going into chaos. What's the first thing you think somebody would say in this situation? Oh my God. Oh God, right? Even if they're atheists, even if they don't believe in God, they still say it because it's a natural reaction. So even in the Quran, it's another ayah that I thought was very interesting. So Allah says that when something like really difficult happens and when you're panicking, the first thing you do is you call to Allah. So even if you don't believe or you say you don't believe in God, it's in our nature. And so that's how Allah has made us, that we always turn to Allah and we always turn to one God because Allah is providing everything for us. And one more thing that I wanted to kind of stress is that sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you're lost or you're hungry. And this goes back to the thing about worshiping something. So we all worship something. What is our mind? What are we remembering? What are we mindful of? Remember how we talked about this a few days ago? What are we mindful of? So think of this, put yourself in this situation. You're hungry or you're lost. And the first thing you do is what? You probably pull out your phone, right? I mean, it makes sense. You're lost, you open up the map, or you're hungry, you call mom, obviously. But we're missing the most crucial step, which is realizing that only Allah is capable of making these things, enabling these things to help me. Because la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no capability or power except for Allah. Everything starts with Him. So that's what you have to think about, and just try to, go over this over and over again and think about it, reflect on it. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Everything starts with Allah. Everything starts with Allah. So even if we have, for example, the ability to order food, the person whoever gave you that ability, whoever made it so that somebody can bring food for you, cook it for you, bring that food to that restaurant, and then somebody can drive that over to your house and you can have it, that's Allah. Allah makes that facilitated for you. So does that mean that we just sit in our room and ask Allah for everything and don't put any work in? That's not the case, right? We have to rely on Allah and take the means. So think about this question. Is it haram to use GPS? Because only Allah can guide me, right? Well, this might happen if you try to do that. So the lesson is, guys, everything starts with Allah. But if you want to succeed, you have to rely on Allah and take the means. If you want to succeed, work hard and trust in God. And tying this all back together, it's a principle, a very, very important principle we learned from the Prophet ﷺ in this story, where a man came to the Prophet with a camel, and he basically asked him, what should I do with this camel? I don't want to lose it, right? Should I tie this camel? Should I just trust in Allah that the camel is not going to go away? And the Prophet ﷺ says to him, tie your camel and trust in God. Do both. Work hard and trust in God, right? Take this lesson for everything. Whenever you have to make a decision, think of this: tie your camel and trust in God. So if you want to make the right decision, work hard, learn as much as you can about the situation, and then ask God. This is what the message of Islam is. It's a balance between two extremes. You work hard and you trust God in this life. And this applies to many things, right? So if you want your team to win the championship, you're on a basketball team, football team. So work hard, make yourself better, and rely on Allah to make you stronger. And the same thing goes with getting into your choice college. You still have to you still have to look for, different things, applications, scholarships, service opportunities, and you have to put your work in, and then you trust Allah. If there's one principle that we bring out of this, well, let's say two principles. It's to work hard in whatever we do and to trust God. But also, as Muslims, we're people of balance, right? Allah says in the Surah Baqarah that we've made you a middle nation. We're a balanced people. So our role as Muslims is to work in this life and to build, to work humbly and to build as if we're going to live here forever. We want to continue to build in this life and we want to work really hard. However, we should also strive for the akhirah, which is our ultimate purpose, as if we would die today. That's a lesson from our Prophet ﷺ. If we look at his life and his character, he was a very humble servant of Allah. He would, repair his shoes by himself. He would stitch his clothes if there was a hole by himself. He was very active in his family, and he would make sure that his family was intact, that there was good relationships. That was the type of the person that our Prophet ﷺ was. And on that side, and on the other side, he also worked to establish, a stronghold for Islam. So as soon as he got to Medina, they built a masjid. They started from the bottom, literally, and they continued to build until they were able to create something amazing. So the message applies for today. Try to put this in our lives. Let's try to follow the Prophet ﷺ in this manner, that we should work hard in this life, rely upon Allah, but also seek for a balance between this life and the next life, which is our ultimate purpose. So that's what we should think about. And we'll come back to this after we're done. So now let's move on. Let's keep going back. So one thing that we briefly mentioned was that the Prophet ﷺ was working at this time, and his work was as a shepherd. So one thing about shepherds is it kind of goes unnoticed. It's a full day involved work. And in the society of the Prophet ﷺ, the Bedouin Arabs, who they had a lot of animals, they were always constantly moving. Their society was very connected with animals. And this work of a shepherd it's very hard work. It's you could say fulfilling. And there's two stories that come to mind. One time the Prophet ﷺ saw this person with really hard hands, because if you do a lot of work with your hands, carpentry, gardening, things like that, then you'll see that your hands start to get like calloused. And the Prophet ﷺ said that these hands will not burn in the fire, because that's what Allah appreciates, hard work. And the second thing is, somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ and they asked for money. They said, like, listen, I need money, I need help. Can you provide for me? The Prophet ﷺ said to this person, get an axe, chop wood, and sell it. Make that money for yourself. Be independent. And so that's hard work, right? And this is something that Allah really appreciates. So this was the role of the Prophet ﷺ as a shepherd. And it's a role that every prophet had before him. And there's a bit of wisdom behind this too, because a shepherd is it's a role that's away from the city, away from the people. People don't really see how much hard work goes into it. And there's a lot of character building involved in this. It's called tarbiyah in Arabic. Remember that word, tarbiyah. So that means it's like developing you as a person. Tarbiyah. It's in this work as a shepherd, it's to learn how to deal with varieties of emotions and to learn how to care for other living beings. Because the shepherd is working with a lot of animals, and oftentimes, in cities, like the lifestyle we live, we really only see animals on our dinner plates, right? Sometimes you might go to the farm and we see the animals, but we don't really live with the animals, and we don't go through their lifestyle. We don't walk in their shoes. So as a shepherd, you see, for example, a camel cries very, very loudly. They have a lot of emotions. And animals, they have their different kind of, they have desires. They want to do certain things. They don't always want to listen. So this requires a lot of patience, a lot of character building, and a lot of work with emotions. It's tarbiyah. And just think about this. We talked about a story a few weeks ago, that a woman who was mentally ill, she went to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him she basically took him wherever she wanted. Where did the Prophet ﷺ get the ability to stay patient through that? Just going everywhere, you don't know what's happening, and he's literally the leader of the city. He has other work to do. How did he get the patience and the beautiful character to just listen to this woman and just go with him? And moreover, when somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ, he would always turn his entire chest and he would face that way. Where did his heart become so soft and so attentive? He paid attention to the even smallest details, that made someone who wanted to talk to him feel so accepted and respected? Where did this come from? And part of it is the wisdom of working as a shepherd, working with people, not working with people, sorry, working with animals, dealing with their emotions, and just building this patience and doing this hard work. That's one thing that we can learn about the teenage years of the Prophet ﷺ. It's developmental. And then two things that we talked about, the pact of chivalry and the Harb al-Fijar, sacrilegious wars. These are two important topics that we talked about. And I believe there were some questions on this, so we can just kind of recap that. So the question on the pact of chivalry, how would the Prophet ﷺ uphold the oath of allegiance, which was the question that was asked. Important thing to know about this is that what does Islam tell us to do? Islam says, speak a good word, speak a straight word, so speak the truth. And stand up for justice, even if it is against yourself. So do the right thing, even if it feels bad, even if it kind of hurts your pride, things like that. So previously in Arab society, the rule of these tribes was to defend your brother, defend your family or your tribe member over the truth. So even if your tribe member gets in a fight with another tribe member, if you're allied with this guy here, then you stick with him, even if he initiated the fight. So that was previous Arab society. Now, what this pact of chivalry did was it kind of broke this, and it said, listen, I'm going to uphold the truth over my friendship, over my allegiance. And the importance of this was that it took us out of that framework, and it tells us nowadays too that I don't defend my Muslim brother against a Jew or Christian if the Muslim brother is clearly the one oppressing, right? And that's what Islam tells us to do. Stand up for justice, even if it is against yourself. And the reason why this was important in Arab society was that it shifted. It was a complete shift in the Arab psychology. So, like I said previously, the Arabs were really, really keen upon upholding tribe relations. Now they switched it to helping the oppressed over the oppressor. And the reason why the Prophet ﷺ said that, I would still uphold this is because it was so monumental. Just think about how these people, this Arab society is so indulged in wrongdoing. Like we said, they used to bury their daughters alive. There's a lot of alcohol, gambling, these types of things going on in society. And they all come together, they meet, and they create this pact out of goodwill because they want to help the oppressed. That's what Islam is about too, guys. That's what Islam is about. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that I would uphold this even after Islam. So just think about how this would happen, right? Put into example, if the Prophet ﷺ is judging between two people and he's called upon by somebody to remember this pact in his dealing, then he would say, okay, I'll uphold it. And all right, so let's move on. The second question, just quickly, was around Bayt al-Maqdis. So what exactly is it, and why is it important? And the important thing to know about Bayt al-Maqdis is it's in Palestine, and it's the rectangular area around the Golden Dome. So it's not just the dome itself, but it's the rectangular compound. So it's everything. And the reason why it's such a virtuous place is because all of the previous prophetic lineage from all the prophets from Yaqub, Yusuf, Musa, Isa, alayhimus salam, all of these people were gathered in this area. So there's a lot of virtue here. And in the Isra al-Mi'raj, the Prophet ﷺ went to this place, Bayt al-Maqdis, and he led all the prophets in prayer at this place. So these are certain things in our tradition that we know, for example, and that's why Bayt al-Maqdis is important. And finally, the last question that I just want to reference to get back to was, what do people say about the Prophet ﷺ's involvement in the war, in this war? And one thing that we should all know is that in our belief as Muslims, we firmly hold the belief that the prophets are infallible, which means that they don't do anything wrong consciously, like they don't commit major sins. And we hold the view that the Prophet ﷺ himself was infallible. So that's 100% certain true. We know that. this story, the narrations of the story, we can't necessarily say that we 100% know that these are 100% true. So we always take the belief, what's called the aqidah, the belief, the creed, right? What we know that is 100% true is that the Prophet ﷺ was infallible. We take that as our number one go-to. And if this story occurs, we don't necessarily have 100% acceptance of the story because it's history. It's not necessarily beliefs of religion. So that's just one thing to know. Our belief is that the Prophet ﷺ was infallible. All right. So now let's move on. And let's go to today's part. So now the Prophet ﷺ, he's past his teenage years. He's getting a little bit older. And he enters as a merchant. And he starts trading. And as he's trading, he becomes known as Al-Amin, which is the trustworthy. And at this time, Khadija radiallahu anha, she's also a very wealthy woman, and she's involved in the trade business. And she basically says, every time my caravan goes out, I feel like I'm losing. I'm losing out on money. I'm not getting as much financial profit as I could be. Something's going on. And so she asked, is there anybody that could, perhaps take my caravan and help me with this, help me succeed in the trade business? And she hears about the Prophet ﷺ, and she employs him. And interestingly, what's similar to know about this is this case of the Prophet ﷺ being employed for his character is very similar to Musa alayhi salam, the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, as he was also employed for his character. And so if you guys want to kind of look at this on your own and just on the side, I believe in Surah Taha, either Surah Taha or it's one of the surahs where it talks about the story of the Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And what happens is that after he escapes from Pharaoh, he's just laying in this valley, and he sees a lot of shepherds. They're trying to water their sheep. And so he sees two women they also have sheep on the side, and he kind of asks them, he says, what's wrong? Why are you guys not watering or giving your sheep water? And they mentioned that, there's all these shepherds here, we have to wait for them, and it's taking a long time. So what he did was he kind of took their flock and he made a way between all the other shepherds and watered the flock. And so basically he did something that was really kind. He showed how strong he was in doing this act, and he's very competent. And so these women, they came back to him and they said, listen, our father wants to hire you as a worker for us. And so because of his character, basically, he was hired for work. And this is very similar to the Prophet ﷺ. So moving on, as the Prophet ﷺ was hired for this work, Khadija radiallahu anha, she has a servant whose name is Maysara, and he goes with the Prophet ﷺ on these caravan trips, and he goes and he watches the trade. And on this journey, the Prophet ﷺ goes to Sham, which is Syria, modern day Syria, and Maysara is with him. And a lot of miracles happen in this trading journey. There's a lot of barakah in the sale, a lot of blessing. Instead of the losses that Khadija radiallahu anha was experiencing, now there's more profit. He's gaining a lot of profit. He's gaining success in the trade. And also, as he's going on this journey, there's a cloud that's just following them over, they're just shrouded by one cloud. And that's another miracle. And along with that, as he reaches a place called Busra, he rests under a tree. And at this point, it's very similar to the story we talked about with Bahira the monk, when the Prophet ﷺ was 12 and he went with his trade caravan. Now there's a different monk whose name is Nestor. And he sees this Prophet ﷺ laying under a tree, basically. And he sees the different miracles that the Prophet ﷺ was coming with. And this is important because Nestor realizes, he also knows the signs of the Prophet who's coming. And he notices this person, and he says to Maysara, don't leave this person. He'll be a prophet. So that's what he said to the servant Maysara. Don't leave this person. He's going to be a prophet. And so the trade happens, and the caravan starts to come back. And on their way back to Mecca, Khadija radiallahu anha, she notices two angels that are kind of shrouding the Prophet ﷺ again as they're heading back to Mecca. And she just notices how magnificent this is, and she calls all the women. She's like, they're all coming together, and they're all watching this happen in front of their eyes. That two angels are literally shrouding the Prophet ﷺ. And so he comes back, and he narrates to the Khadija anha how much profit there was. And at this point, Khadija anha, she notices two important things. She's very amazed by the Prophet ﷺ's character and his piety. All right, his character and his piety. And she starts to develop a longing to marry him because of how trustworthy he is, and because of how, amazing and miraculous he is. So, important thing to note, guys, if you want to get married, you better step up your game, all right? Your character. But in honesty, there's something we can learn from this. It's that even though Khadija, she's old, she's divorced, not that old, fairly old, but she sees these traits in the Prophet ﷺ, and she chooses him to be her husband. So good character and piety are desirable traits in a person to develop a healthy relationship. So obviously, if you're going to get married, you need a job. But these traits will help for cultivating a healthy relationship. If you think about this, if you, instead of taking religion and character as your main focus points of life, you take wealth and looks and profession, that might be good for some temporary time, but ultimately in the long run, you'll suffer. So what we learn from this story is that the focus point of this marriage, the Prophet ﷺ's character and piety, that's what was taken as a focus point. And that's how the marriage lasted. So what we learn from this is that as we get older, as we develop now, it's important to take care of these aspects of our life and to make sure that we're trying to develop our character, trying to be a bit more closer to God, and that we choose who we put in our life wisely. So now the marriage proposal comes. And Khadija radiallahu anha, she, like I said, develops a longing to marry the Prophet ﷺ. And so she sends a proposal through her sister, Nafisa. And just look at the manner and how Khadija radiallahu anha, she asked for his hand. It wasn't direct. She didn't go face to face with him, right? She went in a very subtle manner, in a very humble manner. And Khadija sends her sister to ask him indirectly. And she sends his proposal. And so Nafisa goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and she asks, listen, why aren't you married yet? You're 25. And the Prophet ﷺ says, I don't know how I'm going to get married. I don't have money. And then she says, okay, well, think about this. What if finance is covered? What if somebody who wants to marry you they have money, they're beautiful, they have status? And the Prophet says, okay, so he's listening. He's like, okay, who could this be, right? And then she says, so Khadija wants to marry you. And the Prophet thinks, like, how would this happen? I was an orphan. I don't have a lot of money. She's in a completely different social status. She's wealthy. I'm not sure how I could, provide for her or be in this marriage. But the fact is that the marriage happens and it's accepted, and it becomes nice and facilitated for him. And at this time, Khadija anha, she was 40 years old, and the Prophet was 25. So the most important thing that we should take out of this is that the marriage is based on character. And finally, the hadith of the Prophet is that the best of us are those who are best to people. All right, so let's go back and just kind of end this session off with the principles that we were talking about. So what we learned from this is that if we want success, first of all, it comes from God. We've had to work hard in this life and trust God. And also, we should strive for balance between, this dunya and the akhirah, because that's our ultimate purpose. So if there's anything that we learn from this, if there's something that we take out and we try to apply, it's this. So here's what we'll stop for today. And if you guys want to discuss amongst yourselves for about 2 to 3 minutes, just recap what you learned. Try to come with one thing that you want to work on today, at least today, and just discuss that. and then we'll come back, and if anybody has questions, we can ask that, inshallah. All right, go ahead.
I guess you grow myself as a person. Sorry. That's your notes. I don't think so. I got 1,300.
On what?
I haven't played the game in a minute.
It
goes by 10. We're writing notes.
1,300 words on your notes.
Guys, focus on the topic because I'll ask everyone to present today, okay? And whatever you are discussing, everybody has to stand up and talk. We have a lot of time, so don't worry about it.
How do I check it?
You don't have company?
You can talk to me. I'll come over there.
You talk to yourself.
Talk to yourself.
Yeah, I'm 13. That's crazy. What is that called? Alter? No. This is our first period, right? This is the first period. Break it into 3 sections every Sunday. First one is when we study. Second one is when we have class. Third one is when we have group activity. That's my son. He's in California. He's in California. So he's studying.
All right, guys. Okay, let's come back, guys.
Right, I'm thinking we have 10 minutes, so we ask everyone to stand up and say something. How's that?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine with me. It's good
All
for you
right.
guys.
We'll start from the back. All right, Asad, go ahead.
So something I learned today was that fitra is wired into the human nature. So even if you're like atheist or you don't believe in God, there's still like that subconscious that you do believe in God and God is still there with you.
First, can you hear?
Yeah, I heard that. And that's a really good point, because oftentimes disbelievers in the Quran, they're described with the term kafir. And if you look at the actual Arabic meaning of kafir, there's 2 words. There's one, it says a farmer who kind of, you would kind of like think, why would a farmer be called kafir? And the other one is disbeliever. Well, think of what a farmer does. You have a seed and you have a bunch of dirt in ground. You take that seed, you bury it under the ground, and you cover it up. So linguistically, kafir is somebody that covers up something. So really, disbelievers, even though they know in their heart that God is real and that these things are true, Islam is true, they still cover it up for other reasons. Not sure exactly why. Maybe it's their pride, maybe it's things that they want to believe that are not true, but they still want to. The essence is that they're covering up something. So that's exactly right.
Someone.
I learned that everything starts and ends with Allah, and if you want to succeed something, you have to trust Allah and work hard.
Good. Perfect. So, Samad, now I want you to, next time you make a decision, try to remember the first thing you got to do is ask Allah, right? That's the first thing you want to do. Okay.
All right, guys, be loud, okay, when you're presenting. Sabik, why don't you stand up and talk so for us can see you also?
What I also learned is trust in Allah and work hard, which what I call work hard, pray hard. Reference.
Okay, very good. Yeah, if you want to take a screenshot of this, you can put it as your wallpaper, right? Your iPhone background. Get some motivation. Look at your phone. Trust God. Okay, I'll do it. Good job, Saqib.
Sabik.
Sabiq. Oh, Sabiq. MashaAllah.
Saqib's twin, but his name is Sabik.
MashaAllah. Amazing.
All right, Abdullah.
Like what I learned was that good character is like above everything else. Like when it comes to like how the Arabs were like dealing with crime and stuff back then, and then how the Prophet introduced like the truth over like friendships and companionship.
Good, good. Perfect.
Oh,
Shazan. Yes.
so like probably the biggest thing I learned was the oh my god thing, because like it's like I did not know that before because I thought like oh my god was just a religious thing. I didn't know that atheists also could say it, but like because it's a universal term saying God, right?
Yeah.
There is no
Yeah.
like boundary to that. You can say oh my god even if you're an idol worshiper, right? Then that's your God.
Yeah, like exactly like we're saying. You don't necessarily have to identify as Muslim, Christian, Jewish. The fact is the fact. The truth is the truth that God exists. That's the truth. So even if somebody, like we said, covers it up and proposes the idea that they're, a disbeliever, that they're atheist, and that, oh, I think there's no God, right? The truth is the truth. You can't cover up the truth. God exists. That's why this world is here. That's why we're created. That's why we have the things we have. So even though they're covering it up, in the most intense of situations, like it says in the Quran, right? When a crisis happens, they go back to that nature because their heart is affected. So all the things, all the barriers, basically, like think of it as walls, right? They put up walls. So they have their heart here, and then there's one wall, two wall, three wall. What happens when an earthquake comes? Everything breaks down. The ground shakes, the walls break, the roofs fall down. Things go into chaos. And so it hits right back to that heart, their nature, and they go back to God. And then when things come back again, they can build those walls again, then go back to whatever, atheist stuff they want to say. But the truth is the truth.
On social media, OMG, right? Everybody does that. OMG. I know you guys text back, OMG, something happened. I see it so often, especially with all the teenagers. All right, Shaham.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
I learned that you have to have a balance of both working hard and trusting in God.
Good, good.
Good,
Awesome.
good. Milhan.
Oh, well, I learned that you, in order, it doesn't matter like the age difference, that they gotta both the character on the inside or on the outside.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again, Milhan?
Yeah, it's not about the outside, about the inside, but it really counts.
Okay, good, good.
It's a character, right? I mean, that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, that is the most important. Character is very important, but also keep in mind that there's also hadith that talk about, cleanliness is half of faith. So the external part does matter. You do want to look your best. You do want to make sure that you're clean, you're looking well, your clothes are nice, but the internal part is really what matters, because that's kind of where your actions and your behaviors, your thoughts, everything, that's what matters really. So if you can fix your internal, your character, then you've got a pretty good thing going.
Fine.
I learned that similar to like what Milhan said, that your character is one of the most important things about you, and that you can't like have like it kind of trumps everything else, like money or like status or anything else. Like if you don't have good character, then it doesn't really mean much.
Thank you.
And even the smallest things, right? Even if you shake somebody's hand and you look him in the eyes and you make sure that you've given your attention to that, even that matters. That's even the smallest details, but that's character. So even if you can focus on that, even if that's one thing you apply, at least you've made a change there, and you've improved your character. You've made a step forward in following the Prophet ﷺ. So that's a good thing. Good job, Ismail.
I learned that good character and piety is something that can be applied universally, and it's an aspect that should be applied in everything, not only in your faith, but to just be a better human and to be more moral to like the people around you. Because at the end of the day, that's what is giving you sawab. And if you're not a good person towards people, people won't be good towards you.
Good. Yeah. Golden principle, right? Be like to others as you want them to be to you. Good.
All right, let's change direction. Razan.
I learned that obviously you have to put your trust in God, but you can't just rely everything on God. You have to put your input in as well, and God will do His part. You will do yours, and then it just works out. Inshallah, however it goes.
Good, very good. Yeah, that's
Goes back to-
important.
Goes back to
Yeah.
the story of camel, right? So I think that's important. You trust in God, but you have to have common sense as well. Right? Zainab?
I learned that like it's good to make sure that your reputation is good because like other people have a perception of you and like making sure that people see you as trustworthy and kind is like important.
Right, exactly. That's a good point. One thing that comes to mind when you say that, there was one time where the companions were lining up for war, and they're all kind of like in an army line, and the Prophet ﷺ was just going and making sure that everybody was in line. And so there's one person that was kind of a little bit ahead or something, so he just kind of poked him and said, just move back, and it sort of hurt the person that was poked. So he kind of expressed that, and the Prophet ﷺ, what he did was he said, okay, now get your revenge on me, basically. So what I did to you, it hurt you, so do it to me and we're equal. But then after that, he kind of just he kind of hugged the Prophet ﷺ, and it just shows like such a beautiful moment of character. Like you said, reputation matters. So if you did something to somebody and it possibly hurt them, it's a fair thing to do to go back to them and to apologize and to say, listen, I want to make up. Can we, get together again, or maybe you can just like the Prophet ﷺ did there, and that just strengthens your bond. It kind of clears your reputation and also strengthens your bond with somebody. So that's a really good point.
Dani?
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Sorry about that.
A little louder, Danya.
I learned that being trustworthy is one of the best traits that you can have. That's why the Prophet was known for being trustworthy.
So being trustworthy is one of the best traits you can have, and the Prophet was known for that. So
Good. Yes. MashaAllah.
Yamna?
I learned that it's important to be independent and do hard work, and also about the third which is caring for others, and but also character building and being patient.
Zoha?
Very good.
I learned that Islam is kind of like the balance between two extremes. So you have the dunya, which is kind of like a lot of distraction, and your like success, like your wealth, and then your akhirah, which is like you have to pay namaz on time and secure your place in Jannah. So our job is to kind of find the balance between the two.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. Shakira?
I learned that Khadija married the Prophet.
I cannot hear you, so he will not be able to. You have to be a little bit louder or come in the front.
I learned that Khadija married the Prophet mostly because of his character.
Go there
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Good. Awesome. So just keep that in mind when you get older, right? All right. Okay, let's move on.
Mariam?
I learned about the Jihad.
No, I can't hear you, Mariam. Sorry, be louder. Just a little louder.
I learned about the people who care for others with deep emotions, building patience.
Be louder.
Like building character and like building patience and how it can like help you.
Building character and building patience can help you.
Good. Yes, absolutely.
All right, Sumaya.
I learned that good character.
Sumaya, just like you yell at Hassan and Hamza at home, just like that. Be as loud.
I learned that good character attracts good people, and if you wanted to be treated a certain way, then you should treat people how you want to be treated.
Exactly. Good. MashaAllah.
Fatima, same thing for you, right?
Yes. So I learned that it's important to maintain good character because, like the Prophet did with, also to maintain good character and also to learn to appreciate other people's emotions, like the Prophet did with the sheep, because he was able to apply it to other aspects of his life as well.
Interestingly, this is a little bit off topic, but kind of relates to what you said. I believe a year ago, there's this thing called LinkedIn. Maybe you guys have heard of it. You're not like necessarily on that level of getting jobs and internships and whatnot, but the number one trait that bosses and companies were looking for was empathy. So not like a skill, not like, this degree or that degree. They were actually looking for empathy because people want to have a good work environment. And so if you're able to do what the Prophet ﷺ did, which is care for people, show empathy, have this appreciation and respect of everybody, then you've gained a huge, huge skill. And it's helpful in this life too, right? Number one skill that people were looking for in companies, empathy. So that's the sunnah. All right.
Aisha?
I learned that it's not only important to trust in Allah, but you have to like use common sense and also do like your part.
Alright.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fizan?
I learned that you have to put faith and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything that you do.
Trusting in Allah for everything that you do. Go ahead, Hassan.
One of the things that I learned was like Khadija was like around 40 while the Prophet was 25.
When they got married, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was 40 and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 25. Let's get in the habit of doing that.
I learned that like building a good foundation, like how the Prophet, like when he was working as a shepherd, he built like his patience and his empathy for like the animals, so he was able to carry that on later into his life.
Good. Exactly. And that's how he became such an effective people leader.
Arman?
I learned that you have to find a perfect balance between working hard and trusting Allah.
Good.
I'm kind of gonna repeat what everyone was saying, but like just the emphasis on character and how you're gonna hold yourself with others, and basically how Sallallahu was such a great role model for everyone to follow on that.
Alright, so what I learned is the concept of tarbiyah, where we grow as a person and everything, grow mentally, grow physically, grow religiously, and how the Prophet used that with the mentally ill woman, where she took him and walked around with him and everything. The Prophet used his past experience with using a shepherd in order to help him, in order to listen to him, and that contributes to tarbiyah.
Good. That's great.
I learned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he was a shepherd in his late teens, and then it really helped him build up his patience, and it gave him experience in like leading.
Good.
All right, and Mohni, welcome to YCC.
Assalamualaikum. And
Alaikum
unfortunately, would probably be that you should prioritize justice over friendship.
Okay. Yes. Speaking the truth, right? So obviously you want to have friends. So you're not gonna go and just tell every friend that you get, oh, if you do something wrong, I'm gonna point it out in front of everybody, right? That's not, necessarily the case what we learn, but the idea is that if somebody, does something wrong to somebody else, like they've kind of oppressed somebody, then you should help the oppressed. You should not side with the person that did wrong. So that's what we learned from this.
Excellent, guys. Thank you. Good recap. And I think what I learned was going around. Yes, there was a lot of repeat, but there were some items that only 2 or 3 people talked about, right? So the topic about animals, how to deal with animals, I think it came up twice. Tarbiyah came up once. I think that's good, right? I mean, we covered pretty much everything that we learned today. We covered everything that we learned over the last few weeks in the recap today as well, right? So good job, guys. Thank you. For us, Jazakallah khair.
Welcome. Remember, guys, and even if you repeat things like 10, 15 times over and over again, so what? Repeat it even more. Keep repeating it until it becomes part of your life, because that's the idea here. We mentioned in the first lesson that if we can do one thing, which is improve from these lessons, even if you don't remember the history, if you don't remember the teenage years, the marriage, the caravans, things like that, if you remember the principles and it makes you a better person, you've done your job. So keep repeating these. Just repeat them, even if these sound so cliche. Just repeat them, because when it comes to the part of you have to actually apply this lesson, something difficult comes in your life, and you have to trust God, and you have to work to overcome that obstacle. This will help you do that. This will help you succeed, and each and every one of you guys can do that. That's the goal. All right. So thank you guys for listening. We're done 6 lessons. Inshallah, it's really good. Hopefully see you guys next Sunday. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.